Okay, my fellow freaks, here we are in the home stretch. I've been filming for 4 hours. I lost my pointing stick. I'm tired. This is a completely different day, if you can't tell by the different shirt and hair situation that I have going on. But I am committed. I am committed to finishing this. And we actually accidentally got to the worst part of the story, so we've switched from white wine to red to ease some of the pain. Where we left off, we were in the Etsy supply shop with Kevin, Neil, and Andrew, and they were shopping for a new racket. I was going to say stick. It's a racket. A new racket for Neil. Neil is kind of trying to get some information from Andrew about why he is so, withholding with Kevin and why he's willing to give ground to Neil. And so they're just kind of chatting about Andrew's general apathy and where it comes from, why he struggles so much to care about anything, including Exy, even though Kevin has got him on the hook for however many years they're on the Foxes as his protection. And Neil asks Andrew a real question. Here's a real question. How have you survived this long when you're so violently self-destructive? Andrew cocked his head to one side in a question. Neil didn't know if Andrew was playing stupid to rile him or if Andrew really was oblivious. Either way, it was frustrating. He wondered why no one else had caught on, if people noticed and just didn't care enough to say it. Now that Neil saw it, though, he couldn't look past it. Anytime the Foxes mentioned Andrew's upcoming sobriety or Andrew's name popped up in the write-ups on the team performance at games, the focus was on what a danger he was. People talked about his trial and how it saved them from Andrew. No one said what they were doing to save Andrew from himself. It's really sad knowing how the story goes. So Neil is kind of the first person ever to really see through Andrew's self-destruction and kind of try and understand what's going on with him, why it's happening, and what he can do to help mitigate it. No one has ever considered Andrew. They just kind of take for granted that he is a dangerous element. And Neil is well, there must be a reason. And I think that is very revelatory for Andrew. Andrew, of course, changes the subject. He goes and gets Kevin. Kevin purchases a few rackets for Neil, but the ones in the palmetto colors are going to take a little while to come, so they get him a racket for now to use, just a plain racket for now to use. And Neil knows how expensive it is and how precious it is, so he's not letting go of it. So after they're done at the Etsy store, they go to Nikki's parents' house, the Hemmicks, which is down the street from the Etsy store in Columbia, South Carolina. They're driving over there and Nikki is super excited because this is going to be the first time he's seen his parents in, I think, 3 years at this point, almost 3 years. He came back from Germany and he was gay again, and so they didn't want anything to do with him. So he's this could be the moment where I get to reconnect with my family once and for all. They get to the Hemmicks' house and Nikki's mom, Maria, who is Mexican, opens the door. It is very much the classic, downtrodden Latina wife saved from her quote-unquote war-torn Central/South American country by a white minister trope. In my version of the story, I would cast a really robust telenovela actress in this role. Someone like Itati Cantoral, Barbara Mori, someone who could really sink their teeth into this role and just bring it to life. Because I personally think that Nikki's parents are really interesting. And if I am, I'm fan casting this, and if I am fan casting a series to develop out of this, like a Netflix adaptation, or better yet, let's do Apple TV. Because Apple TV is not liable to cancel it after one season like Netflix is. Okay, the Buccaneers is getting a third season, so anything's possible over at Apple TV. Let's start the letter writing campaign right now, okay? But I would cast Nikki's parents as Lee Pace and whatever telenovela actress I put up here. I think we would be cooking with gas, okay? Because this plot line is very pivotal for everywhere we're going for the rest of the show. Okay, so we're at Nikki's family's house. Nikki is coming into the house, whatever. His mom is oh my God, I'm so glad you guys are here. Dinner is in the oven. They go out. They're going to go sit in the backyard at the house and have dinner al fresco, as they say, in the UK for some ungodly reason. They're all sitting around the table. Luther prays over the food. Neil is like trying to be polite. And I'm pretty sure, like, given his life, this is probably his first like saved ass family dinner that he's ever had. Like, this is probably the first time he's ever sat down at a table and thought of Christ, or Christ was mentioned. So he's trying to be polite. Kevin's trying to be polite. Aaron could give less, like, he's just kind of like, oh, whatever, this is what they do. Nikki isn't praying because he doesn't pray to his parents' homophobic ass god, and Andrew is just tapping the table with a fork while Luther is praying. Luther, who is Nikki's dad, ends up asking Neil, he's like, well, are you religious? Because Neil was praying, and Neil is like, no. And he doesn't really want to talk about it because he doesn't want to start a fight. And hilariously, Andrew was like, oh, wow, that's new. Like, this is the first time you've ever not wanted to start a fight. They're eating dinner, and it's really awkward because it's clear they thought that they were coming to dinner because Nikki's parents were like moving past their prejudice. I will again say this is 2006, and I cannot stress enough how homophobic 2006 was. Okay, there was a reason that Hilary Duff was on the N every other like commercial break saying, when you say that's so gay, do you hear what you say? Like, it was bad back then. And we're talking about like outward shows of homophobia, I think society at large is still very homophobic. That's why there's so many closeted celebrities. Like, you would think, like, you're in Hollywood, everyone in Hollywood is gay, why don't you just come out? But like, people's opportunities really reduce once they come out as gay or once they are outed as gay. There's still a lot of homophobia in our society now, but it was especially worse and like even more sanctioned in a southern state like South Carolina in the year 2006. So Nikki's parents ask him what he's studying. He tells them that he's studying marketing, and they're like, oh, what do you want to do with that? And he's like, Eric, his boyfriend from Germany, Eric's cousin, I think, or sister, works at a PR firm in Germany, in Salzburg. In Germany. And so he is like, I'm gonna move back to Germany whenever I graduate, and she said that if I get good grades then I can work at the PR firm. And his parents are like, oh, so you're still with the man? And they're like devastated that their son has not outgrown the homosexuality that caused them to send him to a conversion camp. Then he ran away to Germany, the gayest country in Europe, because again, Nikki's parents are homophobic. So it's starting to become clear that like Nikki's parents didn't invite them here because they feel this like very strong conviction towards their son and like repairing their relationship with their son. So Neil is like, what the fuck is going on? Like, why are we here? And Nikki asked the same question. He's like, I can't be that black and white. Nikki said piteously, I won't. Why did you call us down here if we're going to just have the same old fight again? Luther was unmoved by Nikki's heartbreak and said calmly, things have come to light recently that made us question our current situation. We have committed to repairing this family. He glanced at Maria, who nodded in happy encouragement. But we understand that it will be a long uphill path. We brought you down here so we could decide on the first steps together. Enlighten us, Andrew said, leaning forward over his plate like he couldn't wait for the answer. If the first step isn't tolerance, where does a pair of bigots begin in fixing a mess like this? Luther met Andrew's stare with a calm one of his own, with reparations for past mistakes. That is why you are here. Oh no, Andrew said. I am only here because Neil whined at me until I agreed to come along. Leave me out of this. Luther frowned. Across the table from him, Maria held up a calming hand and said, let's eat. This kind of conversation is too difficult on an empty stomach. We'll eat and try again, and then reward our efforts with dessert. There's pie in the oven. Apple, Nicholas. Used to be your favorite. It was a meager peace offering, considering the harsh words it interrupted, but Nikki was desperate for any glimmer of hope. He nodded, tucked into his dinner. Silence reigned over the table for a while before Aaron finally broke it. So Aaron is chattering away with Luther and Maria about his friends and like people that he knew when he was living in Columbia before he moved to Palmetto. And then at some point, Andrew gets up and goes inside. Luther gets up too and follows Andrew inside, and they start talking. And as I mentioned before, Neil has been very nervous this whole time that Luther and Andrew are going to get into some sort of altercation, especially because now Neil knows that Andrew is gay. So he's like thinking that part of the reason that Andrew hates Luther so much is because Luther is horribly homophobic and abandoned Nikki because of that. So he's like trying to listen through the door to hear what Andrew and Luther are saying to each other. And it initially seems to be going okay, and then it starts to get louder, and Neil is like, there's like chattering around the table, and Neil is like hyper aware of what's going on inside, and he is like worried about it. So Luther comes back outside alone, looking worn and defeated, but otherwise unharmed. He sits down, and they keep eating, and then at some point Maria goes inside to check on the pie, and Neil is still like, where is Andrew? Like, why is Andrew just inside of the house by himself? So Neil offers to clear the table. He offers himself and Kevin to help clear the table so he can go inside and kind of like investigate and inspect what's going on. So he heads inside. Nikki comes in too, and Nikki's talking to Neil, and because they're all like, where is Andrew at this point, basically, but they're not super worried about it because they're in the house alone. Nikki asks Neil to check on Andrew and make sure that he's not breaking anything valuable, because before they had gone into the house, Neil took his racket that he had just gotten from the Etsy store out of the car, because he didn't want to leave it there, I guess, assuming like it might get broken into and stolen or something. And Andrew took the racket from him and was threatening to like bash up Luther's really expensive car. Luther is the minister, you know, classic Southern American minister. He has like a really expensive car in the driveway, even though he's supposed to be like a follower of Jesus and an example of Jesus's piety. And more importantly, poverty. So Andrew's like threatening to break up Luther's car, and Neil manages to get the racket away from him. He brings it inside and he like leaves it in the house. Nikki is like, can you make sure that Andrew isn't breaking anything valuable? Because Andrew had threatened to break things before they came inside. Neil is like, okay, yeah, that's fine. I'm going to go find Andrew. Then Maria says to him, there's no need to worry, Maria said before Neil could duck inside again. In fact, I think it's promising he has gone this long. He'll come back when he's finished speaking with Drake. That is when we add a new player to the board. Okay. Yes, I cast Harris Dickinson as Drake. Okay. Sexy people. We'll get there. All right. As soon as Maria says that, Neil is like, what? What are you talking about? And then Luther, they've gone outside at this point. So Luther says, this dinner was not originally our idea, Luther said. One of Andrew's former foster brothers came to us for help. They parted on unfriendly terms years ago, and it's been so long since they last spoke, he's afraid their relationship is irreparably damaged. It made us think of our own familial problems, and we were inspired to reach out again. Luther's voice was a buzz in Neil's head, overlaid with Higgins' insistent pleas for Andrew's help. The investigation into Richard Spear was a dead end, Higgins said. Richard wasn't the man Higgins wanted to charge. He wasn't the one the Spears' foster children were too afraid to implicate. Higgins had a new suspect in mind, but Andrew threw him out of South Carolina as soon as he heard Drake's name. Drake, Neil said. Was his last name Spear? Was he Richard and Cass's son? Luther looked hesitant. Andrew has spoken to you about him? Neil let the door slam behind him and bolted across the kitchen. Andrew had been gone a while. Either Drake was dead or Andrew was in serious trouble. Neil didn't know which one it was, and he wasn't going to this showdown empty-handed. He was good at picking fights, but he rarely won them. That didn't mean he couldn't stack the odds in his favor. He grabbed Aaron for backup because Aaron was closer than Kevin and snatched his racket on the way into the hall. I say sexy people can be evil too. And that's why I have cast Harris Dickinson as Drake. We have to look in the face of evil sometimes. So I'm going to talk about what happens next. This is the like ultimate trigger warning. Like what I'm about to describe is very aggressive and triggering, and I didn't know about it when I was going into reading the book. I think it's probably for the better because it was like shocking, but also like I've seen every episode of Law & Order SVU, or at least every episode of the first 20 seasons of Law & Order SVU, so like I'm not surprised by most things, but still it's very triggering. So this is the moment when it finally like slams into Neil's consciousness what exactly is going on. Drake, who is Andrew's former foster brother, had gotten in contact with Nikki's parents, Luther and Maria, and basically begged them to set up a meet in a pretense to get Andrew to come to the house because Luther probably knew that he would never come of his own volition. They invited Nikki with the caveat that they would only like have the dinner if Nikki brought Aaron and Andrew. Well, Nikki happened to also bring Kevin and Neil is the one who has been spending the entire year trading secrets with Andrew, trying to figure out what his deal is, why he is the way that he is, trying to peel away the layers of what all is going on with Andrew and his terrible mental state, and like why he really is on the medication that he's on that makes him so like manic and euphoric. There have been hints throughout the book about what was going on. I mean, as soon as I found out that Andrew's character was in the foster care system, I was like, oh, so he was molested. It wasn't clear exactly what was going on because Neil didn't have all the information and Andrew was just like dropping hints, and Neil didn't know what the right questions to ask were. So to recap, Higgins came to Palmetto to talk to Andrew about the investigation that he was doing into Cass Spear's home. Cass Spear was Andrew's foster mother, who was the closest thing that he had to what Renee got with her foster mother, whose name I currently can't remember. Someone who really loved him, who really cared about him, who was willing to like give him the home that he needed and rehabilitate him in the way that he needed, even after his own biological mother had abandoned him. There was a problem that made Andrew like plot to go to juvie, and then when he was released from juvie, he went to Columbia to live with Aaron and Aaron's mother, and Neil has basically been trying to put together what happened that made Andrew want to escape by going to juvie, basically. Initially, it's the same thing that Higgins thought. Initially, Higgins thought, oh, it must have been the foster father who was, like, molesting Andrew, and that's why he tried to escape. But it turns out, and Neil puts together in this moment, that it was Drake, Andrew's foster brother, and Cass's son. Neil goes upstairs with his racket in hand, and he can hear some rhythmic noises. This is just so horrible. He's like inspecting the door next to the room that is locked, that Andrew is clearly in, to figure out what it's made out of, and see if he can kick it down, and he can. So he kicks it down, and he sees Drake on top of Andrew, actively assaulting him. He comes into the room. Aaron is right behind him. Neil has given Aaron his racket because he's like, I need to have full leverage to be able to kick the door down. So he's given Aaron his racket. Aaron comes in behind him. He sees what's happening, and he immediately whacks Drake in the head as hard as he possibly can with this steel racket. And Drake falls off the bed dead. Like, it crunches one of his eyeballs into his brain and he dies. Andrew is on the bed, covered in blood, with his face, like, pressed into a pillow, because that's what Drake had, like, forced his face into a pillow. And he's laughing. And this helps me to kind of understand what's going on with Andrew's medication, which is that instead of feeling anything, all he feels is this, like, manic, unmitigated euphoria. There's just like this emptiness inside of him, and it becomes this like almost Joker-esque, but not like evil Joker-esque, you know? It's like if the Joker wasn't, instead of being chaotic evil, if the Joker was like true neutral or like lawful neutral, you know? Andrew is on the bed, and Neil immediately runs over to him because he knows that they've made a lot of noise and that like people are going to come upstairs, and Andrew is going to be seen in his delicate state. So Neil runs over to him and covers Andrew with a sheet. Kevin runs upstairs and sees what has happened, and then runs back downstairs to go get Nikki and Luther. Andrew calls over Aaron, and he says to Aaron, he's like about to be sick, he's like gonna throw up, he's clearly completely dissociated, like he doesn't remember what's happened, he just is like disorientated and trying to figure out what's going on. He probably has a concussion, there's like an injury on his temple that's bleeding, and Andrew beckons Aaron over, and he says, quiet, look at me, he said. But it took him a little while longer before he could sit up and face Aaron again. He pressed a hand to Aaron's bloody shirt. It's everywhere. What did he do? It's not mine, Aaron said. It's not mine. It's Andrew. Andrew touched Aaron's temple where he himself was injured, as if he expected to find an identical injury there. Did he touch you? What did he... Andrew knotted his fingers in Aaron's hair and yanked to shut him up. Answer me. I said, did he touch you? No, Aaron said. I'm going to kill him, Andrew said. He's already dead, Neil said. That explains the silence, Andrew said. But that's not who I meant. Look, we don't even have to go anywhere. He'll come right to us. So Luther comes up the stairs with Kevin and Nikki, and Nikki is absolutely horrified about what has happened in his childhood home. And Andrew confronts Luther, and this is when we finally find out the real reason that Andrew hates Luther so much. Oh, Luther, Andrew said. Oh, good. You made it. Saves me the trouble of going downstairs to find you. Hey, as long as you're here, do you want to explain what Drake is doing here? I can't wait to hear it. I hope it's good. What in God's, Luther started, voice hoarse. Oh, no, Andrew interrupted him. No, don't ask that. You know better. You know better, he said again with heat. Andrew tilted forward as far as he dared. He started to sway, but Neil caught his shoulder to keep him from falling. Looks like I was right about him after all. Or do you still think this was all a big misunderstanding? Go on. Tell me how I'm too unbalanced to understand normal brotherly affection and love. Tell me this is natural. Nikki looked like he'd been sucker punched. Aaron's flinch was full body. Across the room, Kevin was staring at Andrew like he'd seen a ghost. Andrew was oblivious to the effect his words had on any of them. He was smiling with vicious glee as he stared Luther down. Hey, Luther, speaking of misunderstandings, am I remembering this wrong? Or didn't you promise me you would talk to Cass? You told me she wasn't going to foster any more children after me, but apparently she's had 6 more since I left juvie. 6, Luther. I'm no good at math, but even I know that 6 is an awful lot higher than 0. How many did you think were in her house when Drake was home between deployments? Now you let him into your house, Andrew said. You put him under the same roof as your son, as my brother, after everything I did to keep them away from each other? Andrew gave Aaron's hair a fierce tug, inadvertently yanking Aaron closer to him, and finally let go. As soon as I get my balance back, I'm going to take you apart, Luther. This is the only warning you're going to get. Aaron's face went white with fear and horror. This has happened before. This is the thing that is, like, in part so heartbreaking about this book, and about Andrew's story in general, is that it becomes violently clear why he is the way that he is, why he's on the medication that he's on, and, like, all of the cataclysms that led to this moment. And the other aspect of it that's absolutely heartbreaking is that he was only in this situation because Nikki wanted reconnect with his family. Like, Nikki was believing that his parents were being more open-minded or willing to communicate with him or, like, meet him in the middle or something. But really it was like this sick ruse that Andrew's abusive foster brother put together. And it's sad, too, because it was in part facilitated by Neil, because Nikki went and asked Neil to help him. I think the only saving grace in this situation is that because of Andrew's medication, he's so high out of his mind and euphoric that it's not, like, settling into him what's happened. Like, he's not reacting in a traumatized manner throughout the next few chapters. He is just kind of, like, going through the motions, and he says to Neil a few times, like, I don't feel anything anymore because of this medication. But even that is, like, really sad and heartbreaking. Aaron gets mad too because they're all realizing that Andrew tried to tell Luther when Luther came to visit him in juvie exactly what Drake was doing to him and exactly why he ended up in juvie, and Luther did not believe him. He called it a misunderstanding, and that's why Andrew, like, hates the word misunderstanding. But he told Luther what was happening, and he trusted him to get in contact with Cass, make sure that she stopped having foster children, all of that. But then, like, in part because of Andrew's trauma, when he gets out and Nikki is being, like, gay bashed outside of Eden's Twilight, that's why he freaks out and, like, almost kills those guys when he's beating them up, because it's like a trauma response almost, if that makes sense. And everyone is disgusted with Luther. They're disgusted to find out that he knew exactly what Drake was doing to Andrew, and he still left them alone in the house together. Not only that, but, like, facilitated Andrew's assault. It's like, what did you think was going to happen? Did you think that he was just saying, like, oh, this happened to me because it was Tuesday and his butt itched? Like, it's maddening to think about, like, a person that homophobic being also that, like, that homophobic, that self-righteous, that quote-unquote religious, being also that, like, flippant with the lives and safety of the children in their lives. But, you know, it happens more often than you know. That's part of why there is a, like, abuse scandal in basically every church that exists. Like, institutionalized religion harbors this. We don't have to get into it right now, okay? They've called the police. Kevin has called the police, and they start to hear sirens, and Andrew realizes that, like, because he has his armbands on that have his knives in them, he has to get rid of them. Andrew picked up on it a second later and glanced over his shoulder. He thought for a moment, then gave an expansive shrug and let go of Aaron. He peeled his armbands off one at a time and dropped them in Neil's lap. He said something, but Neil didn't hear him. The pale shade of scarred skin was too familiar and too startling for him to not react. Neil grabbed hold of Andrew's wrist. He started to turn Andrew's arm over. Sure, he'd imagined things, but Andrew clamped his free hand down on Neil's forearm. Andrew, Neil started, just so we're clear, I'll kill you. So we also find out that part of the reason that Andrew wears these armbands is because he used to self-harm. So this is a lot of, like, horrible... Oh, also... hate him. He's dead, just like Seth. So down on the floor you go. This is a lot of trauma dump for Andrew in this moment. He was molested by his foster brother, who was the son of the only, like, kind of mother figure that he had in his life. He forcibly went to juvie and then tried to tell his biological uncle what was happening to him. His uncle didn't believe him and then sent him to live with the twin who was chosen by his mother over him. He found out that his mother was abusing his twin. He unalived his mother to save his twin, and now his twin hates him because he never got the chance to reconcile with their abusive mother. And to cope with all of the, like, stress, he was cutting himself. And also, he's on this horrible psychedelic, like, manic medication because he was protecting his cousin, his evil uncle's son, from being beaten for being gay outside of a bar that his cousin worked at. That's more trauma for, like, 17,000 lifetimes, but it's all happening. It's all happening to this singular boy. And this is kind of like the climax of this line of the story. So Neil he doesn't have pockets on him that are deep enough for him to put Andrew's armbands in. So he just stashes them in between the mattress and the box spring in the room that they're all in. And then the police come in and take care of everything. A lot of stuff happens next, and I don't have notes on all of it, so I'm going to try and remember it as best as I can. But if I forget anything, you will certainly let me know in the comments down below. They go to the hospital. Andrew's, like, rushed to the emergency room to be checked on. Of course, he's injured anally. And also he had been hit in the head with some sort of blunt object. So they rush him to the hospital, and Aaron ends up getting arrested for killing Drake. Neil is pissed because he's like, it's so obviously a case of self-defense, or at the very least, it was like he was clearly trying to protect his brother. Like, his brother was being violently attacked. He didn't do it because he, like, had a grudge. Like, he didn't even know the guy. So Neil is pissed. Wymack shows up, and Neil is, like, thinking about, how the hell did Wymack get here so quickly? And then he realizes that Kevin must have called Wymack before he got Nikki, after he saw what had happened to Andrew. So they're at the hospital waiting for Andrew. Nikki has gone back to, I think, the cousin's home in Colombia. Andrew comes out, and once again, he's, like, gone to the world. Manic, basically. He comes out and he's laughing, and he's been, like, stitched up and all of that, and Wymack drives Neil and Andrew back to the cousin's house in Colombia. When they pull into the driveway, there's an unfamiliar car in the driveway, and Neil realizes that it's because Betsy, the team shrink, is there. Wymack has called in Betsy because they've all gone through a trauma that is, like, too much to handle on their own, especially them all being, like, 18, 19, 20 years old. Like, it's a lot to deal with. And Andrew is pissed because he's like, ugh, why is she here? But also, Andrew has kind of a good relationship with Betsy. Like, he does actually go in and speak to her, and he uses his sessions to the best of his ability, unlike Neil, who is wary of her at sight. Betsy is in the house, and she has like milk. She makes them all cocoa, and Neil is like, this is very unserious for what has just happened. We're just gonna like sit down and drink cocoa after I just saw one of my teammates be raped. He was set up by the preacher to be assaulted by a man who was known for doing. So Neil is like annoyed, and he's not having any of this, and he insists that Wymack call Officer Higgins so that he can let the police office in Columbia know that Drake wasn't just some guy that Aaron happened to kill. Like, Drake was a suspect in this like long span, like years long abuse of children in this specific foster home. This is also when Neil finally asks Andrew, like, he's looking for the last piece of the puzzle, basically, of why Andrew went to juvie in the first place. Because Neil is thinking that Andrew didn't report Drake initially because he loved Cass too much, and he didn't want Cass to lose her only son, her only like biological son, basically. So he's saying to Andrew, I hope she was worth it. Andrew tilted forward and said, oh, Neil, you're far too heavy to tread on ice this thin. Is this how you stayed quiet? Neil reached up and took hold of Andrew's wrist. He couldn't feel the scars through the cotton sleeve, but he didn't need to. He knew they were there. Andrew knew what he was talking about, judging by how still he went. His smile didn't even flicker, but Neil wasn't fooled. Did you do this so you wouldn't tell her the truth about her son? Maybe I did. What were you going to do, outlast him? Neil asked. He was a graduating senior intent on enlisting, right? All you had to do was hold out until graduation, and then she would adopt you. So what went wrong? And then this is when we fight. Andrew pulls him close, like pulls Neil very close, because they're outside and Wymack is there and Betsy is there, and he doesn't want anybody to hear this. And he says, Drake deferred his enlistment, Andrew said. He wanted to make the most of his last summer with his baby brother. He even asked Cass if we could invite Aaron up for a couple of weeks so we could all meet. Cass left it up to me, but whenever she wasn't looking, Drake tried talking me into it. He wanted to get us both in the same place. He could imagine what we'd look like in bed together, he said. It'd be picture perfect. I've had to do everything to restrain myself from making another throw-up voice or sound, because I know some people have emetophobia. The reason that Andrew went to juvie, the reason that he like did whatever, I don't even remember what he did, but he did something and he got sent to juvie, was because he knew that Drake wanted him to be adopted by Cass so that he could convince Cass to bring Aaron into the house and he could molest them both. And so Andrew went away to juvie to save his brother from being assaulted by his abuser. They don't do storytelling like this. What book have you read that does storytelling like this? You can't name one. Except this one? Okay. Heartstrings, are they pulled? Are you disgusted? Are you hurt? Are you broken? Are you locked in like I was? I finished this book in one day. Like, oh my god. Okay. Neil is volunteered to go run errands with Betsy. They have to go to the grocery store to get food because there's no food in the house. They have to go, I think this is the next morning, I don't exactly remember. They have to go get Neil some more clothes because Neil's clothes under his coat that he's wearing are covered in Drake and or Andrew's blood. And he didn't bring a change of clothes because nobody expected that they were going to be staying overnight in Columbia, and he doesn't have any clothes at the cousin's house. They also have to go to the Etsy store so that he can get another stick because the racket. Because the racket that he had was used in a murder. So it's in evidence. And while all of this is happening, Aaron is still currently at the police station. And I think Kevin and Nikki are in the house with Andrew. So Neil goes off with Betsy and he's a bitch to her, as he usually is. He's really annoying with Betsy. I'm like, just get over yourself. Like, she literally just wants to help, but he's skeptical of anybody, who wants to help him for any reason. And this whole time, Andrew's being like anachronistically cheery, and Neil is freaked out about it because he's like, this is not like, you just went through something, so you were just re-traumatized in the worst way possible. And Neil also feels very bad. Like, he really feels like he played a role in what has happened to Andrew. And he's spooked by everything. Betsy's also trying to figure out, like, if they premeditated this murder somehow, which I, like, okay, I kind of get why Neil is so wary of her. But she asks him why he brought this stick, to, like, confront Drake, and he's like, well, I knew he was a Marine, and I don't fight well, so I couldn't take him, so I had to bring the stick. And also Aaron, in case things got very sticky. I don't understand what it is that you're not understanding about this situation. Andrew has also given Neil his keys because, and again, remember, Andrew has this, like, fancy sports car, and Neil knows that he, like, doesn't let anybody except Nikki drive it. So Andrew has just given Neil his keys to his car, and he's like, he's going to with Betsy back to Luther and Maria's house to pick up the car. He gets to the house and he goes up to, like, knock on the door. He's like, I left something in the house, I have to go get it. He goes up to knock on the door, and Maria answers the door, and she's, like, very wary and scared and nervous and clearly shamed. He says, let me in. We left something here yesterday. I will get it for you, Maria said. Tell me where to find it. In the bed you made for your own nephew, Neil said. Maria flinched so hard she almost yanked the door shut. I mean, you did kind of make that bed for your nephew. Like, it's horrific what happened to Andrew at the hands of people who he should have been able to trust. He should have been able to trust his mother not to abandon him. He should have been able to trust his older foster brother not to take advantage of him. He should have been able to trust his foster mother to notice what was happening. He should have been able to trust Luther to believe what he said to him. And he also should have been able to trust Luther and Maria not to bring someone into their home whom he had accused of molesting him. So many adults failed him at so many points. So Neil goes up into the bedroom and he gets Andrew's armbands, and then he drives Andrew's car back to the cousin's house. When he gets back, he's, like, in the room. He's sent into the room with Nikki and Kevin because Andrew's, like, in a room on his own somewhere. And while he's in there, he can, like, he, like, kind of walks down the hall a little, but he hears the adults having a conversation. And he's nosy and a brown noser and an eavesdropper, so he, like, listens in the hallway for a little bit. And he basically hears Betsy, he hears Abby, Wymack, and Betsy fighting about whether they should recommit Andrew to a mental institution. Betsy wants to take Andrew off of his medication. He, like I said, he's just experienced an immense trauma, and he has no ability to manage it or regulate it. Abby is very worried about that because she's like, you're asking him to go through recovery physically, emotionally, mentally, and withdrawal from this medication that he's been on at the same time. Like, that's going to be a recipe for disaster. Wymack is basically on Betsy's side, and Abby's annoyed by that because, again, they're secretly flirting, but not so secretly. Because he's like, I trust you to make the best decision possible for my students. If you think that it's time to take him off his medication, because Andrew's supposed to go off his meds in May anyway, like, his mandated period of being on them was almost up. It's just like, she's like, he's experienced an acute trauma, like, he needs to go off them now, and he needs to do it in a supervised facility where he can be, like, watched round the clock and taken care of. He just was supposed to go to the facility in May, but now Betsy is saying, because of what's happened, we should send him a little bit earlier. Neil is standing in the hallway listening to this conversation. He comes in and he's like, do it. Like, take him off his meds. Because, like I said, he knows that the meds are getting in the way of the healing that Andrew needs to be able to do in order to, like, grapple with what has just happened to him, and also grapple with the lifetime of negative experiences that he's had, and to give him a chance to actually, like, find love, family, care, and community in and amongst the Foxes. Because as of right now, he's just, like, manic and apathetic. Like, he doesn't give a fuck about anything or anyone in a very deep way. And the meds are in the way of him being able to, like, sink into and, like, actually feel his feelings. which in a way is good, because if he sinks into and feels his feelings, he could get very depressive and violent towards himself, or violent towards other people, as he was known to be in the past. But in another way, it's really bad, because it's like, it's a huge barrier between him and healing. So when Neil gets to the bedroom where Nikki and Kevin are, Nikki is like beating himself up. "We shouldn't have come here," Nikki said, sounding as wretched as he looked. "I should have listened all those times Andrew told me to give up on them. If we hadn't, we wouldn't be here right now. Andrew wouldn't..." Nikki closed his eyes, sucked in a breath, in a deep, unsteady breath. "What have I done?" "You didn't do anything," Neil said. He searched for words, but the ones he found weren't his. They were Wymac's, shared with Neil to ease Neil's guilt over Seth's death. "You didn't know this was going to happen. None of us did. If we'd known, we wouldn't have come." "Betsy said that too, but do you really believe it?" Nikki asked. "Can you? We knew Andrew didn't want to come. We made him anyway. I should have just trusted him. I should have known it was something big if he could hold a grudge through all those drugs." "This is your father's fault," Neil said. "He set Andrew up with alcohol," Nikki said, with a broken laugh. "He told me in the police last night. He talked to Andrew knowing it was going to end with an argument. He promised Andrew alcohol as a peace offering. Drake's idea, see? Dad just had to tell Andrew the bottle was upstairs, and Drake and Andrew would have all the privacy they needed to work on their issues." A savage edge crept into Nikki's voice as he mocked his father's words. "There was no bottle," Neil guessed. "There was. That's what Drake hit Andrew with, son of a bitch." Nikki's face crumpled, and he rolled onto his side and presented Neil with his back. So, yeah. It was a scheme that Todd set up. It was indeed a scheme that Todd set up. So all of this is happening. They're staying in Colombia. They're probably going to head home that night. Wymac has informed the Foxes back home what has happened, and so Neil is like wary of meeting them, but he knows that they like need each other in this moment. I think there's a lawyer there too, and Matt's mom posts the bail for Aaron, because Aaron and Andrew don't have the money to do that, and it would be very expensive for the school, and it's kind of like her thank you to the cousins for getting her son off of drugs, basically. So she posts the bail for Aaron. Aaron gets sent home. There are 2 lawyers there, so I think Matt's mom also sent a lawyer for Aaron. And then there's Andrew's former lawyer from when he was put on his medication in the first place. They're trying to like work all together so that they can get the best plan possible for how they're going to proceed forward. They haven't told Kevin to this point that Andrew is going to be getting institutionalized yet, because of course Kevin only thinks about Exie. So when he finds out, he's pissed, because he's like, what's going to happen to our season? And the coach, rightfully so, is like, can you think about something else for once in your goddamn life? Like, can you think about something and someone other than yourself for once, you freak? What's going to happen to the season? Whatever needs to happen so that Andrew can get taken care of. Neil offers to take care of Kevin in Andrew's stead. This is the first time that Andrew and Kevin are going to be away from each other physically since Kevin joined the team, and Andrew agreed to protect Kevin. So Neil is like, I will do it. Like, I will take up this role. You don't have to worry about anything while you're gone. Just worry about, like, healing, basically. And Andrew is like, so how am I supposed to trust that you're not going to run off the second Rico threatens you, or the second you feel scared or nervous? And Neil is like, I guess you are going to have to trust me the same way I had to trust you when you said that you were going to protect me from the Moriyamas. Betsy takes Andrew away to be institutionalized and be taken off of his medication, right? And they leave right before Aaron returns with his lawyer. Aaron is wondering where Andrew is when he gets back. And I think Andrew, like, purposefully arranged it so that they would not overlap and, like, see each other. There's a lot of baggage there that's going to get unpacked in the next book. When Aaron gets back, it's just, like, awkward because he doesn't want to talk to anyone about what's happened. He's like going internally into himself. He kicks everyone out of the room except for Neil. They have their little tete-a-tete, if you will. Neil is speaking to Aaron and he says, "Are you at all sorry?" Neil asked. "You took his family away from him. If looks could kill, the one that Aaron shot Neil should have flayed the skin from his bones. Do you see why I have Aegon Targaryen as Aaron?" Like, that is the look of a man who would flay the skin from someone's bones, okay? That man was not his family. technically he was only a couple signatures away from being Andrew's legal brother. I didn't mean him anyway. I meant Drake's parents, Cass and Richard Spear, Neil said. They were going to keep Andrew. Drake was an inconvenience Andrew was willing to live with in exchange. An inconvenience, Aaron echoed as he surged to his feet. You fucking... And now Drake is dead, Neil said. Do you think Cass will ever forgive Andrew? It doesn't matter what Drake did to him. She won't be able to look at Andrew without knowing her son is dead because of him. I don't care. Aaron gave a savage jerk of his hand. I don't care if Andrew never speaks to me again. I don't care about Cass or Drake or anyone. What Drake did? No. If I could bring him back from the dead and kill him again, I would. Good, Neil said quietly. So now you understand why Andrew killed your mother. That was such a gotcha. I was like, why the fuck is he saying this to Aaron right now? Like, oh, what's going on? And then when we got to the end, it was like, oh, no. He's correct. So Aaron's trying to be like, that's not the same thing. Like, this is completely different. He's like, he didn't do that for me. He told me he did, Neil said. I didn't even have to ask him. He warned her to stop hitting you, and she wouldn't. He had no choice but to get rid of her. Just like last night, right? Drake was hurting Andrew, and you made him stop. Except I lied, Neil said, getting to his feet. Unlike you, he's not angry that you interfered. I just said that because I needed you to understand. You don't know anything, Aaron said. I know you've got a couple weeks to think about it, Neil said. When Andrew comes back sober, you're going to have to talk about this. You won't get anywhere if you start with Drake. You might as well start with your mother. Now let's get out of this city. This is like the first step in Neil trying to make Aaron realize that like Andrew literally saved his life on multiple occasions. He saved him from being molested too by Drake. He also saved him from being probably unalived by his mother. Like, people who hurt their children in that way don't stop, especially someone who could so callously throw away his twin brother like that. Like, he told her to stop doing it and she didn't stop doing it, so he did what he had to do to make sure that she would stop doing it. Now, am I saying that I advocate for that level of violence? Do I think that that is a solution to people's problem? That's not what I'm saying. No, I never said that out loud. No, I did not. So they leave Columbia and they head back to Fox Tower. When they get back, everyone is there. Caitlin's in the hallway waiting for Aaron because, again, Aaron has gone through a huge trauma, and the whole team is just like ready to receive them into their arms. They go into Matt and Neil's room, and the team tries to like talk to them basically, and Aaron immediately gets annoyed and runs off with Caitlin. Like, he leaves, and he leaves the rest of the team, sans the twins, to like peel apart what has just happened. They're all asking if everyone's all right, trying to look out for them. They're talking about what happened, and Kevin, of course, is still worried about this season and about if the Foxes are going to be able to continue to play. Because as I said at the beginning, and as I've said multiple times, when they lost Seth, they came down to the smallest a team could be in order to stay in the NCAA XE, Division I XE League. So if Andrew is considered to be de-enrolled from the school through his institutionalization, then that means that the team would be disqualified from the league and they wouldn't be able to like move forward at all. So Kevin is kind of right to be anxious about it, but if we remember back to the beginning of the book, they got used to playing an entire season with just one goalie on goal for the whole game. They only switched it up once they played against the Ravens and realized that they could kind of like handle running the whole game on their own with just one goalie. So losing Andrew is not ideal, but it also doesn't mean that moving forward is impossible, because they could, in theory, just do the same thing that they did earlier in the year, but just have Renee on goal the whole season. They would be down an alternate, so there would be like one less person to sub in for the back line, which is what they did at the beginning. Like, they had Renee sub in for Allison throughout those earlier games, so they would be down a person to sub in for the back line, but it's doable. It's not ideal, but it's possible. So really, they're at a point where the only question is if they want to. Coach Remen from USC, the USC XE team, has said that he's going to vouch for them to the ERC, which is the like XE board, people who are in charge of XE. I don't know. You know how Adam Silver is the commissioner of the NBA? Like, the ERC is like the NBA commissioners board, basically. Coach Remen is going to vouch for them. Unanimously, all of the teams have said, we want them to be able to continue their season. And they're shocked because they're like, everyone's so mean to us all the time. But I think it's just because it's like, it's kind of an effed up situation. Like, and also, if they were disqualified, they've been playing such a good season that if they were disqualified, it would almost like, they'd never get to find out if, like, how far they could go based off of the season that they've been playing, you know? So the Coach Wymack asked them, he's like, so what do you want to do? What's the idea here? Do you want to give up or do you want to keep going? And they all say, you know, I mean, like, if the other teams are going to vouch for us, if Remen is going to back us with the ERC, we can play one goalie down for a few weeks and do this. And so they all decide that they're going to continue playing, which is so sweetie and so cutie. Okay, we are speed running the end of this series because as much as I love these books, I've been talking for like 5 hours and I'm so tired of it. Okay, the whole situation with Andrew being institutionalized happens like the week-ish before Thanksgiving. For Thanksgiving, because Neil is an orphan and he doesn't have anywhere to go, he ends up going to Wymack's house to have Thanksgiving with Wymack, Abby, Kevin, and Nikki. They have, and I think Aaron's there too, I don't exactly remember. They have a grand old time. It's really cute, it's really sweet, it's so fun. They're rapidly approaching the end of the year. It is December. They have one more game for the year, I think, and then there's the winter banquet, and then it's winter break. I think they play their last game of the year. I don't remember if they won or if they lost. Again, you know, so you let me know in the comments down below. But they get to the winter banquet, and at the winter banquet, they once again have to encounter the Ravens. Oh, so sorry. Before they get to the winter banquet, Matt talks to Neil when they're in their room and he's like, I know you might not have a place to go for Christmas. Like, you went to Wymack's house for Thanksgiving. I don't want you to stay here for winter break by yourself. So if you would like to come stay with me and my mom at my mom's house, that would be so great. You can even invite the rest of the monsters. She's been wanting to meet them for a long time. And Lord knows we have enough space in our house. So Neil is like, oh my God, I'm finally going to get to have a real Christmas. I'm so excited. And he's thinking to himself about how he's going to convince the other guys to go with him. But like, it's definitely a thought on his mind that he could potentially go to Matt's house for Christmas this year. Oh yeah, at some point, one of the vixens asked Neil if he would go to the winter banquet with her, and he was like, no, I'm not really interested, like, I don't really want to go with you. So then Renee asked Neil, because Andrew is out and Andrew is Renee's normal date, so they're going to go to the winter banquet together. They all get to the winter banquet, and Tetsuji Moriyama is announcing who's moving on to semifinals in the spring season. There is a very telling paragraph though about Neil and his many identities and like how he feels about himself, so I'm going to read that right now. He told Andrew he would stand with Kevin no matter what. He didn't intend to break that promise. Neil might be an easily spooked runaway, and Nathaniel was a hunted young man, but Abram was the one who was the one shielded from and untouched by his father's bloody business. Neil would pull on every murder he'd seen and every endless desperate night, and he'd face Rico unflinching. It was the least he could do. It was all he could do. So Neil feels a real obligation to Andrew to like fulfill his promise to protect Kevin, and he's like, I'm not running away, I'm not splitting, I'm standing strong, and I'm going to show up for these people who have shown up for me, namely Andrew. So Abram is actually Neil's like birth middle name. His name is Nathaniel Abram. I don't think we know his last name yet. And Abram was the name that his parents used to like shield him, I guess, and like get him into Little League, Exy, and like it was kind of his alias for a normal kid. It was his normal kid alias. Like I said, Tetsuji is announcing who the like rankings and who's moving forward to the next phase. So of course the Ravens are ranked first. The next ranking is Palmetto State, the Foxes. They're ranked number 2 in the Southeastern District. So if you don't know anything about sports, if you're like unfamiliar with sports in general, they are like usually broken up into conferences or districts. So like the NFL has like the AFC and the NFC, I think. And like the teams in the AFC and NFC will play against each other week to week until they like whittle their way down. And then the Super Bowl is like one team from the NFC and one team from the AFC, and they play against each other. So it's the same thing that's happening here. There's a southeastern district of XE. USC, for example, is like in the western district, right? And then I think like University of Maryland, like the Terrapins would be in the northeastern district or whatever. So like the country is broken up into a bunch of different districts. And in this southeastern district, the Foxes have ranked 2. Then it's Breckenridge, then Belmonte. And they are thrilled. Someone comes up to Neil. One of the Hornets didn't wait for him to be finished, but leaned across the table and gestured at Kevin and Neil. How the hell did the 2 of you beat Breckenridge? It wasn't just the 2 of us, Neil said. The look she gave him said she wasn't impressed by that modesty. Neil shrugged and let it slide. He understood her skepticism, but he stood by his words. Because Palmetto State and Breckenridge ended the season with the same 12-2 record, the ERC used their goals ratio as a tiebreaker. It was the same method they used in semifinals, which was why spring semis were considered a wild card round. The Foxes' points earned-lost ratio was simply better than the Jackals was. A large part of that could be accredited to their defense line, from their unyielding goalkeepers to their aggressive backliners, but the ratio also relied heavily on the strikers' performance. Somehow Neil and Kevin scored enough this season to one-up the Jackals. Neil didn't know how they'd done it, but he didn't care. The Jackals came to Palmetto State in August with every intention of hurting both Seth and Kevin. Neil had loathed them ever since. Placing second meant they didn't have to face the Jackals again, fortunately. Up until the semifinals, spring games ran in even and odd brackets. Odd-ranked teams would play on Friday nights, and the evens would play on Saturdays. Thank God, Nikki spoke right on cue. Thank God we're not playing the odds again. We might actually have a chance this year. We'll make it, Dan said. We have to. We owe the Ravens a rematch. They're all very excited because they are moving on to the next phase, which is semifinals, and then after that is finals. And again, this is unprecedented for the Foxes team. I had to rearrange the shot so we could get Rico back in. So while they're at the winter banquet, Rico corners Neil. Your lack of survival instincts is supremely distressing, Rico said. Take that look off your face before I carve it off. Neil hadn't realized he was smiling, too, a cruel look he'd inherited from his father. Neil lowered his cup so Rico could get a better look at it. I would love to see you try. You think I'm afraid of your knife? I'm the butcher's son. That's 3 strikes. Rico dragged a finger across his throat and rolled his head against his gesture. I am disappointed in you, Kevin. You promised the master you would take care of this. Obviously you have not, and I'm very curious as to why. He tried, Neil said. It didn't take. Rico pressed a thumb to Neil's cheekbone in the same spot where the 3 had their numbered tattoos. Do us all a favor and do not speak again. Your insolence has already cost you 2 teammates. You cannot even imagine what is coming next. Hearing Rico confirmed he'd orchestrated Seth's death made Neil sick with anger. Andrew and Kevin had said it, but Wymack had written it off as paranoia. Neil hadn't believed Andrew because he hadn't wanted to. But that what if had followed him all semester. Neil held up his free hand and showed Rico his steady fingers. I'm shaking with fear. You should be, Rico said. You think you can defy me because I am not your father, but you are forgetting one very important fact. I am the family your father was afraid of. And yes, Nathaniel, he was very afraid. Neil lowered his hand and leaned close. Not of you, he said with fierce emphasis. You're not part of that family, remember? You're the cast-off. He hoped it would hit, but he didn't realize how deep it would cut. He'd never seen the look on Rico's face, but he knew he'd signed his death warrant. Jean, Rico said, without looking away from Neil, take Kevin and leave us. Go see Matt, Neil said when Kevin hesitated. Now, Rico insisted. So, Neil, like Rico said, lacks a self-preservation instinct, and he's just pissed Rico off to high heaven. Remember from last video, Rico, the way that the Moriyamas kind of work is that the oldest son in the hierarchy takes over the Yakuza branch and the younger son takes over the Exi branch. So Tetsuji, who's Rico's uncle, has taken over the Ravens and their whole Exi thing. And because Rico is the younger sibling, he has an older brother whose name I currently can't remember, but their father is Kengo Moriyama, who's the head of the Moriyama crime family. But because Rico is the second brother, he is being groomed to be the leader of the Ravens. And he's completely shut out of all of the Moriyama's, like, bigger crimes that they do. And he feels that very deeply. where things get a little spicy. Rico is pissed and he's kind of like threatening Neil, and Neil says, "You wouldn't," Neil said. "Not in front of all these people." "I do not care if they see," Rico said. "A dog who bites his master's hand deserved to be slaughtered. The location and the audience are inconsequential. I'm not a dog. I'm a fox. You are nothing but what I tell you to be. We talked about your delusions. I warned you to learn your place. Let go of me, king." "I am king," Rico agreed. "And you are going to spend Christmas at my castle. You are coming to Evermore for winter break." "Don't," Rico said when Neil opened his mouth to argue. "Push me again. I am the only thing keeping you alive." "No, you're not," Neil said. Rico stared at him for an endless minute, then smiled. Neil's stomach dropped at the sight of it. He knew what was coming before Rico opened his mouth, and he refused to believe it. "You must be referring to that goalkeeper. You know which one I mean, I'm sure. The miniature one with the disgusting attitude who thinks he can take my things. That reminds me, I haven't seen him lately." Rico looked over his shoulder as if expecting Andrew to materialize from thin air. He let go of Neil, but Neil couldn't breathe, much less move to put space between them. 2 teammates, Rico had said. Neil's insolence had cost him 2 teammates, but Seth was only 1. Rico turned back on Neil and wagged a finger as if remembering. But that's right. I heard they carted him away. Something about his brother fucking him brainless, yes. How scandalous. How traumatizing." "Don't," Neil said. Rico ignored him. "Drake was an interesting man, wasn't he? I should thank the police for leading me straight to him. I might not have discovered him otherwise. Did you know, Nathaniel? Oakland lawyers are some of the cheapest to buy off. It only took 3 phone calls to arrange the whole thing." "You set Andrew up." "That isn't even the best part," Rico smiled when Neil shook his head and continued. "Did you know I've bought one of the doctors at East Haven, too? Unless you want these little therapy sessions of his to turn into therapeutic reenactments, you will be on a plane to West Virginia tomorrow morning. Jean will give your ticket to Kevin. Do you understand me?" Neil didn't have words, so he answered with his fist. He didn't have a lot of room to swing, but he made do and caught Rico right in his vulgar mouth. It knocked Rico back a step, gave Neil a little more space, and Neil caught him in the eye next. He lunged away from the table and slammed into Rico, but Rico was already moving to meet him. Neil crashed into the table so hard he sent it skidding from behind him, and he and Rico both hit the floor. Neil jabbed and struck at any part of Rico he could find, only distantly aware of Rico's own vicious blows. Someone was yelling about a fight, or maybe that was his blood roaring in his ears. So this is when we find out the real truth of what happened to Andrew. Rico at some point put 2 and 2 together that Andrew was protecting both Neil and Kevin. Andrew was the element that was in the way of him being able to access either of them. Rico was the mastermind of the plan to get Drake from California to Columbia and talking to Luther into Luther's house so that he could quote unquote reconcile with Andrew. He paid off a bunch of lawyers in Oakland. He called around to the police stations. He figured out what Drake was being investigated for, and he set the whole thing up. So Neil is kind of off the hook. Like, Neil and Nikki were both blaming themselves for it, but neither of them knew that there was this larger plan at work to re-traumatize Andrew and get Andrew away from both Neil and Kevin. All of that was so that Rico could force Neil to go to Evermore in West Virginia over winter break. So, like I said earlier, Neil was planning to maybe go stay at Matt's house with the rest of the monsters and have his first, real family Christmas. But because Rico has said that he orchestrated all of this, and he's also threatened that if Neil does not go to Evermore, he has paid off one of the doctors at the hospital that Andrew is staying at to assault Andrew again if Neil tries to resist. So he's basically in a no-win situation. He has to go to Evermore. He has to do whatever Rico says, because if he doesn't, then Andrew is gonna kill himself. It's just, it's a really, really bad situation that Neil is in. And Neil, rightfully, baby girl, beats Rico's ass because of it. He ate that one time. He did eat that one time. after, like, the whole Drake situation, he had asked Matt to teach him how to fight. So that's, like, part of why he's even able to take Rico on, because, like he said, he started a lot of fights, but he's very bad at ending them. But yeah, he used his skills for good this one time. So this, would you believe it, is only 80% of the way, 89% of the way through the book. So Rico has Neil by the balls. And the entire denouement of this book is Neil at Evermore basically being systematically tortured by Rico and the Ravens. He is put through the same grueling training schedule that Kevin grew up being put through. He's worked to the bone, almost to death. Like, this is basically what would happen to him in the spring if/when the Ravens decide that they are going to take possession of him to, like, ensure his silence. And he really doesn't have a choice. Like, he lies to everyone on the team and says that he's going to go to Arizona to be with his family for Christmas, but really he's going to Evermore to be tortured by Rico. And this is kind of like their quote-unquote first training session with him, because, like I said, they're going to take ownership of him in the spring, whether he wants them to or not. And he's not been trained in the insanely rigorous way that the rest of the Ravens have been. Like, Kevin is teaching him Raven drills, and he's, like, working him to the bone during their nightly practices. But it's not the level of brutality that the Ravens experience. So Neil is brought to Edgar Allan. He's put in Evermore in Rico's room that Rico shared with Kevin. He's drilled every day, and then when he gets back to the room, he is beaten by Rico until Rico is bored, basically, which is the same thing that Rico did to Kevin the entire time that Kevin was living at Evermore, until he took it too far and shattered Kevin's dominant hand and made it so that he couldn't play at the same high level that the Ravens expected him to play at anymore. So this is also when we find out a key piece of information about Kevin. So, it was a bad idea. Jean is talking to Neil. It was a bad idea, Jean said. Now you have to unlearn all of your bad habits. Now try on your gear so we know it fits. The bad idea that he's talking about was Neil being a striker. Neil started out in defense, and when he was training at Evermore as a kid, and when he was, like, in XE as a kid, he played defense. Part of the reason that he switched to being a striker was to, like, further his anonymity, but like, he's still the same person. So it's just like, this is what I mean when I say that Neil is an idiot. Jean is saying it was a bad idea because Neil says that his coach Hernandez from Millport, put him on as a striker when he was playing. It was a bad idea, Jean said. Now you have to unlearn all of your bad habits. Now try on your gear so we know it fits. Not in front of you, Neil said. That modesty will be the first thing we break you of. Jean said, there is no room for privacy in the nest. I can't believe you put up with this, Neil said. At least Kevin ran. What's your excuse? I am a mojo, Jean said, as if Neil was being stupid on purpose. My family has belonged to the Moriyamas since before they came to the United States. There is nowhere else for me to go. Just as there is no place for you but here. Kevin is not like us. He is valuable, but he is not property in the same sense. He escaped because he had family to run to. Andrew? Neil gasped. I said family, you hard of hearing imbecile, Jean said. His father, your coach. It took a moment to sink in. When it clicked, Neil recoiled from Jean in shock. What? He knew logically that Kevin had to have a father. Kaylee Day hadn't gotten herself pregnant after all. But she'd never given up the name of Kevin's father, no matter how hard the press pushed. If the rumors were right, that space was blank on Kevin's birth certificate. She named Tetsuji her son's godfather, even though, which was how Kevin ended up at Evermore after Kaylee died. You're lying, Neil said. Why else would Kevin run to such a dreadful team? But he never, and Coach hasn't. Figures he's still too much of a coward to say something about it. Jean gave a derisive flick of his hand. If you don't believe me, look for yourself. The last time I saw his mother's letter, it was tucked inside one of those boring books of his. He's read it so many times, he might have worn the words off of the page by now. But it is worth a shot. If he knew, why did he stay? Neil demanded. He should have gone to Coach when his mother died. He found out only a few years ago, Jean said. We found the letter in the master's house purely by accident. Purely by accident. Kevin stole it, but he never intended to act on the discovery. He knew going meant losing all of this. It wasn't worth it. Jean gestured around the locker room. Once he lost this, of course, there was no reason to stay. You were all insane, Neil says. Says the runaway who joined a Class 1 team, Jean said. Says the man who came here today when he should have run. You are no better than the rest of us. Now, are you going to try on your gear? Or am I going to have to force it on you? Jean is me. Like, Jean is baby girl. Because he's asking the real questions, which are, you stupid bitch, why would you join a Division 1 sports team if you're a runaway who can't be found? Because you're a dumbass. He's stupid. He's an idiot. Yeah, so as I said, every night Neil is being beaten by Rico, and then every day he's being drilled in Raven's drills, and he's being drilled as a backliner, which is an unfamiliar position for him. But this is also when we find out what his last name is. So Tetsuji comes to him and he says Nathaniel Wisniewski. He said, just like he found every syllable wanting Neil. Neil hid his hands in his pocket so he could clench them into fists. No. He thought Jean said his name, but it was barely louder than a breath of air. Neil didn't look back at him. He didn't think it was his imagination that Rico took a half step back to put more space between himself and his uncle. A man who could keep even Rico in line wasn't a man to challenge so carelessly, but Neil had no choice. You will kneel, Tetsuji said. Neil had a feeling that he was going to regret this for the rest of his very short life, but he smiled and said, "Make me." He saw the cane come up, but it was too fast for him to dodge. It caught him in the face across the cheek and the side of his mouth. Neil stumbled under the force of the blow and crashed into the lockers. He didn't feel it. He couldn't feel anything but the fire eating through his skull. Sour flash across his tongue might have been blood, but Neil's mouth was too numb for him to be sure. He brought his hand up instinctively to check his skull for fractures, but Tetsuji's cane caught him in the ribs next, then his shoulder, his arm, until Neil had no choice but to ball himself up and protect himself. Tetsuji didn't stop beating him until he passed out. So that's basically how his time at the Ravens compound goes. He is, like I said, tortured for 2 weeks during winter break as kind of a show of power on their part, the power that they have over him and the lack of power that he himself has. And he tries to resist because he is a defiant person, which is why I'm like, this man, of course, is an Aries, like a January Aquarius. I'm so sorry, no shade, but like, I don't know if I see a January Aquarius saying this, but like, or doing any of this, but sure. And he can't. And they like beat him for weeks and drill him for weeks, and it's horrible. He wakes up a couple weeks later at Upstate Regional Airport in South Carolina. He has no recollection of how he ended up at the airport, the flight from West Virginia to South Carolina, no memory of any of it. He just wakes up and he's in the airport in South Carolina. He gets his phone plugged back up and he's received a bunch of text messages from the Foxes in the 2 weeks that he's fallen off the face of the planet. And then he decides that he's going to call Wymack. Wymack picks up the phone and he says, "You have a good reason to be bothering me on a holiday? I didn't know who else to call," Neil said. He barely recognized his own voice. The last time he'd spoken, he'd been screaming. Apparently his vocal cords still hadn't recovered. Neil pressed his forehead to the wall and tried to breathe. He couldn't remember when breathing was a chore. "Neil?" All the gruff posturing left Wymack's voice. That sharp edge was all alarm. "Are you all right?" No, I'm not. I know it's kind of sudden, but can you come get me? I'm at the airport." "Wait right there," Wymack said. "I'm on my way." So when he first turned on his phone, he looked for a text from Andrew because Andrew had been the one to say to him earlier, "You're going to need this phone at some point, and when you need it, you're going to have to call me. I need to trust that you're going to make that call." But Andrew's number wasn't there, so he knows that Andrew is still in the hospital, so the only other person who he knows is still in the state is Wymack, so he calls Wymack. And also because Wymack is like his adoptive daddy. Wymack goes to the airport to pick up Neil, and he doesn't look anything like the Neil that he's used to seeing. Because remember, Neil had dyed his hair brown, he had worn brown contacts, so they were like accustomed to him looking a certain way, but when Wymack picks him up, he looks completely different. He drives Neil back to his apartment, and Neil is finally able to see himself and see his reflection and what he looks like, and he looks like Nathaniel Abram Wisniewski. He's got red hair, blue eyes. His father's face is staring back at him, and his face is covered in bruises, just like it was when he lived with his father. There's also a huge bandage on his face, and he doesn't know what's under the bandage. And when Wymack takes the bandage off, he's like, "What the fuck is on your face?" And Neil looks in the mirror, and what's on his face is a tattoo of the number 4. Just so that I can paint the picture for you, okay? Can I reach them? Yes, I can. They have these numbers tattooed on their faces, okay? And Jean Moreau has the number 3 tattooed on his face. It was supposed to be Neil who had the number 3 tattooed on his face. But Neil and his mother ran away, so it was not Neil. Rico has the 1, Kevin has the 2, Jean has the 3, and now Neil has the 4. The Ravens tattooed a 4 on his face while they were keeping him prisoner. And Wymack didn't know that Neil was going to Evermore. Like, nobody knew that any of this was happening. And he comes back waifish, skinny, covered in bruises, barely able to walk, covered in bandages, with red hair and blue eyes. And then when they take the bandages off, there's a fucking number 4 tattooed on his face. Like, okay, come on. So Neil goes into Wymack's house and he starts chugging whiskey because him and his mom used to use alcohol as an anesthetic because they couldn't go to the hospital. So he's like downing whiskey, and he tells this to Wymack, and he's like, "I will tell you the rest of the truth about my origins and my life and my story later, but like right now I need a minute. Like, I need some time." Oh yeah, it's New Year's Eve when all of this is happening. It's crazy. It's a crazy ending to a book. Okay, so he's talking to Wymack, and he's telling him about the contract that they gave him at Evermore. And he says, "I didn't sign it," Neil said, looking up from his hands. He lifted his fingers to his face. He couldn't feel his tattoo, but he'd seen Kevin's enough that he knew exactly where it was. "He gave me a contract, but I wouldn't sign it. He couldn't make me. This doesn't mean anything. I'm still a fox." "Of course you are," Wymack said. Neil nodded. Can you imagine being poor Pedro Pascal, and one of your teammates calls you and he's like, "Can you come pick me up from the airport?" And you're like, "Yeah, okay. What the fuck happened? We couldn't get a hold of you for 2 weeks." But again, like, this was 2006, so like, someone not texting you for 2 weeks is like not that weird. Someone not calling you is like not that weird, you know? This brown hair, brown-eyed fuck has red hair and blue eyes and is covered in bandages, and you bring him back to your apartment and he's babbling incoherently. He's like, "I didn't sign it. He gave me a contract. He couldn't make me." You're like, "Okay, that's fine. Yeah. Thank you for telling me. I appreciate that." Neil nodded and looked at the clock. It was 5 till midnight. "Are we going to watch the ball drop? I want to make a wish." "You make wishes on shooting stars," Wymack said. "New Year's is for resolutions." "That's okay too," Neil said. Wymack dug his remote out from under a couch cushion and turned on the TV. Noise and music filled the room. Cameras panned across the room as a band performed on stage. He checked his phone, found the battery blinking critically low, and opened his messages box anyway. He didn't read them. He didn't have time, and the battery wouldn't last long enough. He had enough power to compose a group message, though, so he tapped out a simple Happy New Year to the Foxes. Betsy had told them Andrew's phone was confiscated for the duration of his stay at East Haven, but Neil added his number anyway and pressed send. The response was almost immediate. By the time the midnight countdown started on the screen, by the time Neil looked up and watched the flashing balls start its descent, he'd already heard back from his entire team, most of them in caps lock, with extraneous exclamation marks. He'd ignored them through Christmas, but they seemed excited to hear from him now. He was their family. They were his. They were worth every cut and bruise and scream. Neil watched the ball hit the bottom. It was January. It was a new year. It was 2 days until Andrew's release, 11 days until the first championships match, 4 months until finals. Facing the Foxes on court this spring would be the last mistake Rico ever made. I love when people write, okay? Writing, storytelling, a novel. All right. So much happened. This video is probably 3.5 fucking hours long. Thank you for watching to this point if you've gotten here. I'm full of red wine. I'm about to go eat some pasta that one of my friends made. It's almost midnight. I've been filming this video for what feels like 15 years. But this is The Raven King, the second book in the seminal Foxhole Court series. We're going to start a letter writing campaign to Apple TV Plus to get this shit put on our television screens. Okay, it doesn't have to be this cast, although like I'm non-negotiable on this Allison casting. Like, this is perfect. She's the only one who's like really age appropriate for this. Like, they're all a little bit too old. I'm also non-negotiable on this Betsy Dobson casting. Wymack I can work with, Abby I can work with, Kevin, Neil, all of them I can work with. This motherfucker's like 34. Like, you know, him playing a 19-year-old, is that gonna make sense? I want it, I would like it, but it doesn't have to be them. Allison, Betsy, yeah. I'm 27. She would probably be like 30 by the time that they started filming, you know, so it's kind of like, oh, does this make the most sense? No. So it doesn't have to be this cast, but the show has to happen. Okay. If you're still with me at this point, thank you so much. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for your love and your care and your excitement about this video. This is my favorite book series that I've read in probably the last 10 years. Like, second favorite. No, favorite. Because Wolf Hall is second. I still haven't finished Wolf Hall, so I'll rank it whenever I've finished it. But, like, I love these characters. I love Miss Sakavic. I love her. I wonder if she's single. Anyway, as you can tell, I am off the wine, so I need to stop speaking at some point soon before my light dies and I lose my mind. Please don't forget to subscribe to this channel. I am going to come out with a video about the last book in the series. The last book in the series is the longest book in the series. Prepare yourself for that to be the longest book, for that to be the longest video in this series. Look, I don't know when it's coming out. I'm gonna have to reread the book. I'm gonna have to get these motherfuckers put up on the wall again. I'm gonna have to write the script. It's gonna be a whole thing. So do I know exactly when that's coming out? No, but it will be in your eyeballs at some point in the future. Please leave me a comment in the comments down below. Have you read this book series? If you have not, and I've spoiled it for you, I promise you the writing is so worth it that you're going to love this series anyway. Highly recommend it. It's the best $2 that I have ever spent on Amazon.com in my life. Like, quite literally, Jeff Bezos, take my money. Like, that's the one time that I've been like, thank you so much, bald daddy, for taking my money. Still read it. It's so good. Miles better than any like TikTok famous, book talk famous book that I've ever read. So leave me a comment down below about the most shocking thing that I said in this video, the most surprising plot point, or your favorite fan cast. Literally anything that you want to talk about, because my name is Neida and this is my channel where I talk about literally whatever I want. I put out videos whenever I can. So again, don't forget to subscribe so that you never miss one that's coming up. Give this video a big thumbs up because that really helps me to find other people. And I will see you in the next one. Bye! It's 2007 now. It's 2007. And these motherfuckers have a Ravens team to humiliate. So exciting!